Our next guest is a conservative provocateur who is a Republican candidate running for Congress in Florida's 21st District, home of President Trump. Laura Loomer is gaining strength with activists and donors, and they are buzzing about the possibility that she is the conservative answer to New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Laura began her journalism career working as an undercover journalist for Project Veritas and is mostly known for her ambush interviews on live stream, which is known as getting Loomered. Some of the people that she's confronted on camera include Hillary Clinton, James Comey, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and AOC. Because of her guerrilla-style journalism tactics, Loomer was targeted by the left and big tech and is banned by nearly every social media platform, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Uber, and Lyft. Who knew? I didn't know you could be banned by them.
Really?
Yeah. Laura has always been a loyal supporter of President Trump and has continued to fight for free speech, the First Amendment rights for all Americans. Laura says her campaign is committed to winning her congressional race, and when elected, she will always put the people before politics, partisanship, and party. So tonight we welcome Laura Loomer to our program.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for inviting me on, and thanks for everybody who is attending this Zoom meeting, since you guys are still on lockdown in Michigan and can't have your own actual in-person political events. Thank you for the wonderful introduction as well. I am running for Congress as a Republican here in Florida's 21st Congressional District. It's actually President Trump and Mrs. Trump's home district. And prior to running for Congress, I was doing investigative journalism. I had my own media company, and I was working undercover with Project Veritas for several years. I was undercover in the Hillary Clinton campaign throughout the 2015-2016 presidential cycle, and I was embedded in her campaign undercover exposing voter fraud. And so I'm very familiar with issues surrounding voter fraud, which is now a hot topic of discussion in Michigan, where you guys are located, and now this nationwide discussion about mail-in voting, since you have nearly the entire country on some form of lockdown, and various states differing with their reopening process. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? You can hear me. Okay. Right. And so now, like I said, I'm running for Congress here, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the issues that are facing the people of Michigan, because it's something that is going to replicate itself, in my opinion, in other parts of the country if these totalitarian Democrat officials are not voted out of office. And so, the reason why voter fraud is, such a hot topic right now in Michigan is because President Trump tweeted his concerns about voter fraud and mail-in voting. And, it's interesting when you look at the situation on the ground in Michigan. You have this very tyrannical Governor Whitmer, who has decided to threaten peaceful protesters. We're talking about, Americans, business owners, residents of Michigan who were protesting these tyrannical lockdowns. You have business owners who are out of work. They can't feed their kids. Businesses are suffering. People are, losing money. They're not able to go to work. Their kids can't go to school. And we were told, right? We were told by governors all across the country, but especially Governor Whitmer. And out of all of the anti-quarantine protests across America and all of the peaceful protest efforts to resist these lockdowns. The protests in Michigan, in my opinion, were the most high profile and most recognized because you guys just have an enormous grassroots patriot base in Michigan who was very committed to standing up against these abuses of your rights. And so now what we see after being told by Governor Whitmer and other Democrat officials, right? If you go to church, if you go to synagogue, you'll be arrested, you'll be cited. If you open your business, you'll be arrested, you'll be cited, and you will be fined for violating social distancing. Well, now that you're having these race riots all across the country, what is it? The coronavirus just go away, or is protesting the cure for coronavirus, right? Is supporting radical leftist policies the cure for coronavirus? Because it doesn't seem like she's too concerned with social distancing anymore. And now what you're having is Governor Whitmer herself protest with BLM and Antifa protesters in the street, saying that, oh, it's okay to protest if you're protesting with BLM, but if you're a hair salon owner, you absolutely cannot open your business or else you're a Nazi, right? And I wish that was an exaggeration, but you saw she actually went on CNN and described these peaceful protesters as behaving like Nazis, when in reality, she herself is aligning with BLM and Antifa protesters, rioters, whatever you may want to call them, and it's their tactics that are actually used by Nazis. And so you have this demonization of American business owners who just want to get back to work. They want to participate in the political process, but they're being held hostage in an election year by a hyper-partisan, radical leftist governor who wants to keep the state shut down, and I'm just going to say it because she wants to help Democrats steal the election. And look at her political record, right? Prior to coronavirus, Governor Whitmer was selected to give the Democrat Party response to the State of the Union this year. On top of that, it came out in the Detroit Free Press a few months ago that Governor Whitmer had been briefed by the Democrat Party and interviewed for potentially being the vice presidential nominee. And so that's why I believe she is so power hungry, and that's why she's really trying to make a name for herself by cracking down on people's civil liberties, is because she's probably hoping that they're going to select her as a VP nominee. At the same time, we're being told that these protests are spreading coronavirus. Meanwhile, like I said, she's allowing for Antifa and BLM rioters to protest and wreak havoc all throughout the state of Michigan. When you look at how this is going to affect the political process, right? I myself, as a congressional candidate, have not been able to canvass on the ground or campaign for the last 3 months. And so we are in a presidential election year, and if you are going up against an incumbent like I am, I'm running against Lois Frankel, who is a Democrat, that gives the incumbents an advantage, right? Because, they always hold the advantage in an election year, and especially now that we've had this disruption with coronavirus, by not being able to go outside, by not being able to door knock, by not being able to have political events, and forcing people to have these Zoom meetings, which in themselves are really not the most effective and safe means for communicating, given that Zoom is a Chinese technology. They are interfering in our ability to participate in the political process. Now that people are expressing concerns for mail-in voting, which the Democrats are pushing, we're being told that those are conspiracies. And how are these conspiracies being treated and being responded to by the Democrats? Well, through censorship. And that's something that I, of course, can speak a lot about, because I happen to also be the most censored person in this country, literally banned on every single social media site. I've been debanked. I've been, deplatformed across every single mainstream social media site and payment processor. And even as a declared congressional candidate, candidate who is the front runner in my race, I don't have access to campaign access to campaign social media. And so when these peaceful protesters in Michigan decided to protest Governor Whitmer and her draconian lockdown, when she banned the sale of flags, she banned the sale of paint, threatened to arrest people for going to their neighbor's house, banned the sale of seeds, but then declared abortion clinics as essential services, she said that these were violent protests full of white supremacists and Nazis. And because she is a Democrat and has big tech in her back pocket, like all of these big tech companies happen to be Democrat Party mega donors, they censored, right? They censored all of these peaceful protesters. So there is something very sinister happening in this country with the coronavirus lockdown, with the coronavirus quarantine, and then when you compare it to the Black Lives Matter and Antifa protests, you can see how the Democrats really haven't allowed this crisis to go to waste, and they truly are taking advantage. They truly are taking advantage of these lockdowns to deprive people of participating in the election process. So you had a Facebook page for people in Michigan that had over 400,000 followers shut down, but then meanwhile, Facebook and Twitter are changing their bios to Black Lives Matter, and they're allowing for these protesters to coordinate their rallies and their riots and their protests online. But then when you saw conservatives, the peaceful people who were really protesting lockdown, a lot of them were conservatives, right? And they were told that they were putting people in danger, right? And they were violating Facebook and Twitter's terms of service for harmful conduct by not social distancing, right? So clear-cut bias and clear abuse of power utilized by the Democrats and their cohorts in big tech to deny peaceful protesters and conservatives their right to peacefully assemble and exercise their First Amendment right in an election year, while giving these leftists an upper hand. And now they're actually taking it a step further by censoring the President of the United States while he's talking about vote by mail. He originally said that he was considering shutting off or cutting off federal funding to states like Michigan and Nevada, who were going to be pushing massive vote by mail. And so while the governor of Michigan, this is the hypocrisy, and this is where people really need to wake up and realize that they're being lied to and they're being manipulated, and these coronavirus lockdowns and quarantines are now being used as totalitarian tools by tyrants like Gretchen Whitmer, who are now trying to keep, her desired political class on the streets protesting, participating politically, while keeping people like you, conservative Trump supporters, inside so that you're not able to spread your message. And they know that this is going to affect elections because, well, you can't have your Trump rallies, right? They know that President Trump would have a much bigger attendance in Michigan, like he has in the past, than somebody like Joe Biden, their nominee for the time being. And now these big tech companies are silencing the president while he's warning people in states like Michigan and Nevada not to vote by mail, censoring his tweets, fact-checking his tweets. And this is what, of course, led the president to passing his executive order, is when these social media companies decided to fact-check him in the White House in live time regarding claims of vote by mail. And if you challenge this and you post facts, right, they label it as hate speech. They say it's a conspiracy. They say that it's misinformation. But I want to challenge anybody who says that voter fraud isn't real, or that there isn't fraud associated with absentee ballots and vote by mail. Here's an example straight out of Michigan that you can give to people when you see people in your community, or people like Gretchen Whitmer, say that it's not true, that voter fraud is a hoax, and that there is no voter fraud associated with voting by mail. In 2019, Okay, there is a Michigan Democrat official by the name of Sharika Hawkins, who was a city clerk of Southfield, and she was facing election fraud charges, 6 felony charges, because the Michigan police said that she destroyed 193 absentee voter files and that they were changed, and the original files were found in the garbage. This is a woman who was honored and praised by the Democrat Party at their Dingle 11 Award dinner, which would be the equivalent of the Republican Lincoln Day dinners that many people and many Republican parties across the country have. And so that's just one example. Then there was a lawsuit that was filed in Detroit by a federal court where you have thousands of dead people on voter rolls. And then when you look at the Congresswoman who your state has produced, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, okay, there's accusations and allegations that she fraudulently filed paperwork to run for Congress by using a false address in Dearborn where her father was living, where she wasn't living. And so I just gave you 3 examples. I don't know if these Democrats are incapable of looking at facts. I don't know if they are incapable of accepting the truth. I don't know if they just think that the media is going to do their bidding, which they obviously are, by, telling people that the facts at hand are not the real facts at hand. But this is a problem, and they are now utilizing the help of these social media companies to shut down anybody who challenges them, even when you show them actual facts and evidence up front. And so that is really largely one of the reasons why I was inspired to run for Congress. I started to see that this was a trend that was only gaining more force. This collusion between the Democrats and these big tech companies to silence conservatives and to shut them down. I confronted Jack Dorsey during the 2018 tech censorship hearings in Congress, and I warned President Trump and made a personal plea to him that the Democrats were going to be working with big tech to steal the election by silencing and shadow banning conservatives. We saw that they have already deleted the president's Twitter account several years ago. We've seen the Project Veritas tapes where these social media companies admit to censoring and shadow banning conservatives. We've seen the documents leaked and the conversations leaked from Google boardroom meetings where they're talking about preventing another Trump situation, and they're doing it in real time. And I know that the people of Michigan can sympathize with this because they deleted your Patriot Facebook page, and that's wrong. They should immediately restore. And I would encourage you guys to sue Facebook, because now you have the evidence that clearly Facebook is violating their own terms of service. Because I would love to know, is protesting the police the cure for coronavirus? Because it makes no sense why you're going to shut down, actual peaceful protesters who are protesting quarantine lockdowns while allowing for these BLM and Antifa rioters to protest freely throughout the state of Michigan alongside Governor Whitmer. I think that lawsuits need to be filed. I have utilized litigation as a way to fight back against these companies, and it's a long process, but I think it's necessary for people to start restoring their rights and making these companies and these officials pay. I don't know if you have any questions or not. I can't see you on screen anymore. Can you hear me?
Back on. So yes, we do have some questions.
Okay.
So given the rabidity and anti-Semitic history and agenda of Black Lives Matter, and it crosses over into the Nation of Islam, CARE, Black Panthers, all of that, how do we get our messaging out so that corporations, politicians, school boards, and the clueless Jewish community itself is not, do not blindly bow to this hateful, dangerous malignancy?
Well, look, the messaging is out there, and that's what's so disturbing about this, right? I mean, you guys literally have a Holocaust denier as your congresswoman. Rashida Tlaib is a jihadist, and prior to winning her election, this information was documented. I traveled to Minneapolis and confronted Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar on video and was warning the world about these women prior to them even winning their elections, right? And there's video of Rashida Tlaib physically assaulting me. I was the only Jew in the room, and there's an an interesting story that ties into this, right? Because interestingly enough, the restaurant, a Palestinian-owned restaurant in Minneapolis where Rashida and Ilhan had this event, it's called the Holy Land Deli, located in Minneapolis, or Little Somalia, as you want to call it now. I mean, since literally Minneapolis and Somalia now are practically, you can't distinguish between them. If you look at photos of them in the aftermath of these riots, there's buildings and on fire, tons of people walking around in full niqab and burqa. If someone were to blindfold you and put you in the middle of Minneapolis and ask you where you were, you wouldn't know if you were in Somalia or Minneapolis. That's just how bad it's gotten now as a result of this Marxist jihadist alliance. And it's not a coincidence, right? This is something that has been happening for many years now. You have this alliance, it's called the Red-Green Alliance, or the Red-Green Axis, or the Marxist Jihadist Alliance, where you have these radical leftists in Antifa, these progressive leftist liberals who align themselves with radical Islamic interests. And that is why places like Michigan, places like Minnesota have become really a ground zero for the implementation of Sharia law in America. And people may say, oh, that's too far-fetched. Okay, that is too far-fetched. You cannot have that here in America. That's a conspiracy theory. Well, look at what they just did in Minneapolis. Okay, the Attorney General is a jihadist. The Congresswoman is a jihadist. Keith Ellison's son was literally educated at this academy called TISA Academy, which is a Sharia school. Okay, they just voted to defund the police, and they want to have community policing. If you have a community that is dominated by a Somali presence, and the Somali leaders in the community are getting a pass to freely associate with ISIS-tied Islamic centers, Minneapolis is now the #1 ISIS recruitment location in the United States, according to FBI statistics. What do you think is going to happen when you have community policing? Okay, is that going to be like, community leaders from the different sects of Minneapolis deciding how they control their own communities? Well, yeah, that's what's happening, and that's what's been happening. It's what you call a no-go zone, right? And they're propping up in places like Minneapolis, Dearborn, Hamtramck, which I've been to. People can deny it all they want, but it's true. And I know that the people of Michigan have experienced this themselves. So the most disturbing aspect about this is that, people are already aware of the Jew hatred, but they don't really seem to care, because as we've seen, the Democrat Party, as President Trump perfectly summed up, has become the party of Jew haters and Israel haters. These are people who refuse to pass an anti-Semitism resolution after their new beloved, jihadist congresswoman decided to, openly support BDS and call for the implementation of BDS as a full-blown U.S. policy. Okay, they don't care. There have been no efforts to censure or recall people like Ilhan or Rashida, and that is because Jew hatred is at the core of these progressive policies and their agendas. These people are not supporters of the Jews or the Christians. It's why Jews and Christians in places like Minnesota and places like Michigan and places like New York were literally being threatened with arrest and handcuffed in some places. You had pastors getting arrested, okay, while they were giving a total pass to Ramadan. So you're allowed to get away with not socially distancing if you are celebrating Ramadan, but God forbid you want to go pray to God, or you want to go to synagogue and go to church, or sit in your car in a drive-through church with a pastor. That's a violation somehow of social distancing. That's what we're dealing with, and that is why everybody watching needs to do everything in their power to help elect Republicans, because it doesn't matter. It honestly doesn't matter how much you try to tell these Democrats that what they're doing is wrong, what they're doing is hateful. They know, and that's part of their agenda. That's what they want.
Well said, well spoken. You've personally been targeted by social media censors. What do you think about Mark Zuckerman's appointment of a former leading figure of the Muslim Brotherhood, and I can't even say his first name, but Komen, in Yemen, and the embrace by CARE to his Facebook oversight board?
I believe her name is something like Farouk Carmen or something along those lines. Tawak Carmen.
Yeah.
Look, This is something that I've highlighted and have reported on as well. I was permanently banned and shut down for a tweet in which I referred to Ilhan Omar as anti-Jewish and pro-Sharia, and I exposed Ilhan Omar and people like Rashida Tlaib as being backed by the Muslim Brotherhood through their endorsements and funding of terrorist organizations like CARE, which have a stronghold in places like Minneapolis and Michigan, where you live. You know, if you recall, in May of 2019, Mark Zuckerberg designated several high-profile conservatives, including myself, as dangerous individuals. And their dangerous individuals classification literally classified us as terrorists. It said that a dangerous individual is somebody who is a terrorist, a criminal, a human trafficker, or a serial killer. I am neither of those things, right? And yet he had no problem labeling me as a dangerous individual. Now, go look at Facebook and go look at Twitter. Groups like CARE, which federal judges here in the United States during the Holy Land Foundation terrorism trial found, they were tied to Hamas financially. They were a Muslim Brotherhood organization. The Muslim Brotherhood is designated as a terrorist organization in places like the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Russia. So, you have actual Muslim countries designating this group as an Islamic terrorist organization, and yet Mark Zuckerberg seems to think that Trump-supporting conservatives are more worthy of being designated terrorists than an actual world-renowned jihadist who is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is a serious issue. And, it was the Muslim Brotherhood that lobbied to get me banned from these sites. I filed a lawsuit against CARE, which is the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Wall Street Journal reported in January of 2019 that they had privately lobbied Twitter to silence me. And so when you are being shut down and you're being, labeled a Nazi or a white supremacist for peacefully protesting or wanting to feed your kids and open your business so you can pay your bills, just know that people like Governor Whitmer and members of the Democrat Party and their accomplices in big tech think that you are more of a terrorist than the actual terrorists who they have elected to Congress. Okay, these are, and that may be a controversial statement to say, but we know that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib have sided with ISIS terrorists. Okay, they have refused to condemn Hamas. They have welcomed Muslim Brotherhood officials, Hezbollah officials, Hamas supporters as their special guests. Okay, these are terrorist supporters. So they have elected these terrorist supporters to Congress, and now they are allowing them to basically implement Islamic blasphemy laws and hold American Christians and Jews, American citizens, to Sharia law by silencing you for posting facts. And that's just the insanity of the world that we're living in now.
So Laura, I'm guessing that part of the platform that you're running on is to do something about the monopoly the social media giants have. But I'm wondering, is there anyone right now taking the lead on their platforms for censoring so much, or working to create another platform that's friendly to conservatives?
Yeah, so along with the litigation, of course, I've been encouraging people to move away from sites like Facebook and Twitter, which, you have seen, and now we're seeing they're doing it to the president, silencing and suppressing conservatives so that they can help Democrats and actual terrorist organizations steal the election. There's a new social media site called Parler. It's Parler. I would encourage all of you to get on Parler. It's pro-free speech. Another site is Gab. It's also pro-free speech. I'm on both of those sites. And, a lot of people are flocking to these locations. President Trump's campaign manager just got on Parler. Several members of the Trump family. You have Dan Bongino, who's been talking a lot about it. I'm on there. You're not going to be censored. You can speak about what you want. And when you join these sites, you will really see in live time how censored you are on Twitter, because you can gain 1,000 followers in a week and get interaction on your posts, when I'm sure many of you feel like you're talking to a wall or screaming in an empty forest when you post online, because you never get likes, you never get retweets, and no one sees your content.
Yeah. So this is the first I'm hearing about this, and my husband is a retired police captain, so it's interesting to me. So what's your view about qualified immunity? It's a legal document that shields government officials and police officers from being sued for discretionary actions performed within their official capacity.
Well, I know that that's a hot topic today because the Democrats are proposing their own legislation, which, you know, my opponent happened to be one of the co-sponsors of that. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to basically revoke this immunity so that individual police officers across different police stations in America can be sued, of course. And you know that these officers are represented by unions. And so this is really, and I've issued a statement on this today as well, it's really just a backdoor way for these progressive, radical leftist politicians to defund the police. Some of them are more open about it. You have the AOCs and the Ilhan Omars and the Rashida Tlaibs, you know, the communists in Congress who are openly calling for defunding the police. But then you have these, progressive, radical Democrats who pretend to be more moderate. And so this is their way of supporting measures to defund the police without openly calling for defunding the police, because it sounds sexier and less radical when you talk about, you know, making police officers wear more cameras, and you talk about it as a legal way to help ensure that there will not be racial injustice. But it seems like people don't really want to talk about the facts at hand here, right? Because what happens if individual officers start to get sued and they don't have this immunity? Well, it's going to bankrupt. It's going to bankrupt police stations to the point where they are just defunded and they're not going to be able to afford to have police. It's a problem, and we're seeing our elected officials politicize this death of George Floyd and lie. They're pushing out lies to the American people. I would love to ask these people, what do you mean when you're talking about racial injustice, right? Nobody is denying the fact that people are getting killed by the police, but according to FBI statistics in 2019, more white people were killed by the police than black people. And so, it doesn't seem as though these Democrat officials want to have an open and honest conversation, or maybe they really are telling us that the only lives that matter are black lives, because they don't seem to care about the fact that more white people are being killed, right? So if we're going to talk about this issue, why don't we have a conversation about police brutality or police reform as a whole instead of making it a racial debate? Because it doesn't discriminate. I have been manhandled by police officers during my time as an investigative journalist. There's good cops, there's bad cops. There's cops that want to violate your rights, as we saw during this coronavirus pandemic, and there's cops that, they uphold the Constitution and they're not going to infringe upon your rights. I can't tell you how many times I've been escorted out or physically grabbed and manhandled by police officers for, protesting events where jihadists were speaking inside, fundraisers, political events, and that's a violation of my rights. Isn't that a form of injustice, right? Having your right to peacefully protest infringed upon. We can't have an honest conversation, it seems, about police brutality in this country, because the Democrats want everyone to think that you can only be a victim of police brutality if you're black. Well, I would say that President Trump is a victim of police brutality. I think that it was pretty brutal and vicious for James Comey, who, could be considered one of the top cops in our country, as, the head of the FBI, abusing his power and weaponizing a federal law enforcement agency against a sitting president and the Republican Party to ruin people's lives and falsely accuse them of crimes they never committed. That's a form of police injustice. That's a form of police brutality. It's a form of police brutality in the way that the FBI was weaponized to ruin the life of people like Roger Stone and General Flynn. You don't just have to be physically assaulted or murdered by a police officer for it to be an act of police brutality. There definitely is police corruption, but let's talk about it in an honest way and how it's affecting our country as a whole, not just people by the color of their skin.
Very, very great. Very good points. I personally think that we're not going to have to defund the police departments, because there is going to be no one that wants to be a policeman. We're having people quit the job in droves every day. People are taking early retirement. They are not going to be able to find any qualified people that will serve as police.
Why would you want to be a police officer? I mean, I feel awful for your husband. I would be worried every single day, because they're basically saying that your husband's life doesn't matter. So now they're terrifying police officers to the point where they're actually endangering the lives of officers, not only with their rhetoric, but if a police officer is assaulted or a police officer feels like his life is in danger, most of the time police officers have the ability to use deadly force if necessary, if somebody is charging them with a knife or if somebody is shooting them. But now they're crippling police officers to the point where they're so scared that even if they defend themselves from somebody who is trying to murder them, that they will be fired. Right. And there is such a lack of respect for the life of police officers and for the families of police officers. And their lives are not expendable. Right. Their lives matter, too. Everybody's life matters. And we need to get back to upholding law and order in our country. We need to just get back to this concept of upholding law and order, because if you're not going to be supporting the police, like you said, you're not going to have anybody to protect the citizenry. And then you want to talk about people protecting themselves with their Second Amendment rights. Well, good luck with that. Good luck when you have these Democrat officials calling to defund the police. They're the same people who are banning your guns. And they're utilizing these riots as a way to do that. Here in West Palm Beach, where I'm running for Congress, the mayor this week, he decided to pass a state of emergency, and under that state of emergency, prevented the sale of guns, the sale of ammo, it banned the sale of guns, and it also made it a crime for people to carry their weapon in a public place. That's a violation of concealed carry. That's a violation of people's concealed carry permit owners' rights. That's a violation of the Second Amendment.
You were talking earlier about the police force being disbanded and such. Today, a Minneapolis council member came out and said that you even think about protecting your home from a break-in is privileged thinking.
Yeah, well, they seem to want people to be victimized, and I can't tell you how many friends I have. I have a lot of friends who live in Minneapolis and did a lot of work investigating out in Minneapolis, and a lot of them are scared. They're moving. I have a friend named Marnie putting her house up on the market because she wants to get out. It's becoming very unsafe for people, and outspoken conservative activists are not safe in public anymore in places like Minneapolis. I was told by the Secretary of State of Minnesota that I wasn't allowed to come back to Minnesota simply because I dared to go to an ISIS-tied mosque and question them as to why so many young men were joining ISIS after attending their mosque. And I got pulled over by the police in Minneapolis, and they told me that if I ever went back to that Islamic center, I would be arrested for trespassing. So good luck defunding the police when you have Islamic terrorists running around all over the place. Good luck defunding the police when you have Antifa throwing Molotov cocktails into buildings and burning people's businesses down if they don't want to take the knee. And it's kind of disturbing, right? Like you're seeing this whole move to push people to take a knee, as if being submissive or getting on your knees and making yourself like subservient to somebody else because of the color of your skin as a form of what they're viewing as like reverse reparations or reverse racism, as if that's going to make anything different. And it's an interesting tactic because, these people in Antifa, these radical leftists, they call people like us Nazis, right? Your governor calls people like us Nazis. But kneeling and making people take a knee as a form of racial humiliation is a tactic that dates back all the way to German National Socialists, Nazis, who made Jews in Vienna kneel and scrub the streets as a form of racial humiliation. And they did this as a way to retaliate against perceived Jewish capitalist exploitation. Where have we heard this before? It's the same talking points. These are Nazi tactics, So that's what they're doing. And so the fact that you have, law enforcement officers doing this, you have leaders of companies doing this, you have Nancy Pelosi and the Black Democrat Caucus taking a knee today. These are replicated Nazi tactics, okay? And you can go back and you can look at the pictures. It's what the Nazis did to the Jews in Vienna to humiliate them.
We have just a couple last questions. Recently, President Trump named Antifa as a terrorist organization. What would you like to see done about Antifa and those who financially support them?
Well, look, I mean, I commend President Trump for designating them as a terrorist organization, but this should have been done years ago. I believe that all elected officials who have openly supported Antifa, so we're talking about Keith Ellison, we're talking about Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, AOC, they should have to resign. They should be criminally prosecuted for aiding and abetting terrorist organizations. I also think that the leaders of Antifa and any of these organizations that are affiliated with Antifa need to be raided and prosecuted. I know that that is happening throughout the country right now, at the command of Attorney General William Barr, and there have been numerous arrests already made this week of Antifa leaders. But people need to be prosecuted. They need to be charged with terrorist crimes, and anybody who is found to be supporting these people financially should also be charged with aiding and abetting terrorist organizations.
Yes, ma'am.
So I have a last question. It's like, obviously, your drive and your motivation is inspirational to all of us, and we thank you so much. What do you attribute that to? And finally, what can we do to support you? Tell us what we can do to help you win your election, because we need you.
Thank you.
In Washington.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me on. Thank you. And thanks for your support and your nice words. Look, I have always been politically active. I was always very interested in politics, but for me, I just have a love for my country, and I don't want to live in a socialist America. We constantly hear people like President Trump and others tell us that we will never be a socialist nation, but I say never say never. You see the rise of the most popular voices in Congress are those of the radical left, and they're trying to indoctrinate the youth. I was kicked out of college. I was the president of College Republicans. I know what they're doing to college students. They're indoctrinating them. They're forcing them to accept a radical leftist ideology. And if you oppose, or if you go against the left in college, you are targeted, you are silenced, you are expelled from school, you are threatened, you are harassed. And so I want to live in a country where there's hope for future generations. I want to live in a country where all people, regardless of where they come from, what they are, what they represent, can enjoy constitutional freedoms and protections. And all of those things are currently being threatened by the policies and the radical left agenda coming from the Democrats right now. And so that's why I'm running for Congress, and I filed to run on August 2nd of 2019. And people on the left and the right, they mocked me, and they said that I didn't have a chance of winning, and I wouldn't raise a dime because, of course, just like they do to our president, right? They've labeled me an Islamophobe. They say I'm a racist. They say I'm a white supremacist. But I've out fundraised all of my opponents combined. Okay, I've out fundraised the sitting Democrat incumbent for the last 3 fundraising quarters in a row. The president of the United States has retweeted in support of my candidacy, which is, phenomenal, and also, great given the fact that he's retweeting about me on a site which I'm banned from. And I've received, it's kind of ironic, right? I've received contributions from people in all 50 states, and I'm breaking all sorts of records as a first-time candidate. And that's because, people don't want to be silenced. Censorship is un-American. And my message is bigger than just my congressional campaign. This is a movement. And so while they can censor me, and they can censor you, and, they can censor whoever they may want to censor, right? They can kill the messenger, but they can't kill the message. And they will never be able to silence our message and the passion and the support behind our message. And so with your support and with the support of other American patriots, I know that I'm going to be victorious. I'm going to win my primary on August 18th, and then I'm going to go on to win the general election on November 3rd. And when I do, I'm going to flip Florida 21 red. I'm going to become the youngest woman ever elected to the United States Congress. And we're going to have real representation in Congress, not only for the people of District 21, but for the American people, somebody who is truly going to fight on behalf of the American people in their interests. And so if you want to support my campaign, you can go to lauraloomerforcongress.com, and you can sign up to volunteer. You don't need to live in Florida to volunteer. You can live anywhere you want. You can make phone calls. You can post about my campaign online, since I'm banned everywhere. You can donate online at lauraloomerforcongress.com. You can send a check. And if you are in Florida, you can contact me and my campaign by emailing Laura at lauraloomerforcongress.com or signing up with the volunteer form. And you can come canvass for us. But this really is a grassroots movement, and we're going to win.
Great. We just had a comment which I really liked that said, "Thank you for being stubborn and persistent." And thank you so much for joining us.
As I like to say, the persistence beats the resistance, right? So these leftists can be resistors all they want, but persistence beats the resistance.
Yeah, that was good.
Great. So thank you so much, Laura, for joining us. And, we support you, and hopefully we can help you in many ways in your campaign to win in November.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks so much for tuning in and having me. Appreciate it.
Laura,
Thank you.
good luck.
Yeah.
Godspeed.